I'm Jordan Carter, and I'm curator and co-head of the curatorial department at Dia Art Foundation. Chelsea is on the west side in downtown Manhattan, and it's known for being a hub of contemporary art, really the gallery district, if you will. Chelsea means quite a few things to me because I both live and work here. So it is home to Dia Chelsea, but it is also my neighborhood. I'm going to show you what my perfect day here looks like and meet some friends and colleagues along the way. The Whitney Museum of American Art is a singular institution dedicated to supporting American artists since its founding in 1930. One such artist, Christine's son Kim, has just opened a new exhibition, and I'm excited to learn more about it. So, Christine's son Kim, what drew you to want to work with her and collaborate and invite her to do this really expansive survey?
Christine's son Kim is an artist who works in really fascinating ways with questions of sound and in modes of communication, really across so many different forms. So ASL is her primary language. She also uses written English, which is her second language. And she brings all of this to bear in her work, which is deeply about communication. It's about the complexities of ASL, about how you sign, how those signs operate in space, the concepts embedded in them. And all of this is woven through her own kind of deep lived experience as a deaf person.
So, where are we right now?
We're at essentially the start of the exhibition, and we really wanted visitors to the exhibition to start their experience here with one of her major site-responsive murals. So it's a survey exhibition. We're looking at her career to date from 2011 to 2024, and this is in fact the most recent work in the show. And what you're looking at is a piece called Ghosted Notes. So you have notes, musical notation, very experimental take on the staff lines of a score. And what she's playing around with here are two things. One is the idea of a ghost note, which is a real musical notational term that refers to a note that's making almost no sound, but can nevertheless still have a presence on a score that might be tonal or vibrational. And then she's playing with the more colloquial term, ghosting, ghosted. We all do it, we've all experienced it. But Christine is also digging in here to address experiences that she's had professionally, where an institution might approach her and say, I'd love to work with you. And when she talks about her access needs, the interpreters, the budgets related to that, people will just kind of disappear. So the note is the personification, like we are the note. And then the score, and the way you sign score in ASL is like this, with 4 fingers tracing across the body. But here, if we're the person, if this is the note, the staff line is doing like everything it can to avoid us. The support structure, the lines themselves are dipping and bending and kind of moving all around.
The second stop is the High Line, an elevated public park that features some really exciting examples of public art and really kind of challenges our notions of what public art can be. So, the High Line essentially connects the Whitney all the way up to the Shed. Can you tell me a little bit more about, the High Line's mission and its history?
What we call today the High Line was built in the 1930s, and it was basically a long bridge that served a freight train that connected the Hudson River to the industrial neighborhood of Soho. It was used for many decades, and then in the 80s was fully abandoned. And what happened is that very gorgeous, spontaneous gardens started growing with the seeds that were brought by the wind and by birds. And so that really inspired the creation of what we call today the High Line, which is a public park. When you walk the park these days, you are immersed in a gorgeous natural environment, but you can also see old train tracks that are sort of fragments of that history. And on top of that, we also offer great cultural offering, including public art and public programs throughout the year.
So I'm curious just to hear more about the High Line's approach to public art.
New, usually site-specific artworks that are on view on the park and take very different shapes. So the idea is to use the city as a giant canvas or a giant pedestal to display contemporary art by artists that are not necessarily public art artists, because we like the idea of also offering the challenges to artists that are trying this out for the first time.
Yeah.
It is a very loaded context, but one that usually artists really love to take the challenge to deal with.
So we're on one of the spurs of the High Line, and in front of this really awesome piece by Arthur Sims, A Totem for the High Line.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
This is one of these great works that we ask artists to realize in sort of dialogue with the High Line. So Arthur, who is an artist originally from Jamaica, who lives in Staten Island, decided to create a totem for the High Line. And as often he does, he collects things from the street or from the urban environment and turns them into amazing sculptural assemblages, turning them into these spiritual, almost religious elements. And then you can see there are license plates from different states in America, a reference of the many different people that come from all corners of the world to the High Line. But interestingly, we wanted him to think about using a piece of the High Line for this piece. And the pole is actually a utility pole that he found on Randall's Island, which is a place where we have all our old rail tracks and other pieces of the High Line. So he loved the idea of repurposing something that is connected to New York City.
So Ivan, we're standing in front of this monumental pigeon sculpture titled Dinosaur.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about this work?
As you can see, it's a very nice attraction now in the city. So I was invited to apply, to make a proposal for the plinth. And I work a lot about monuments and why do we have the monuments we have and what's the narrative behind those. It was a bit difficult for me to imagine a sculpture that goes on top of a plinth because most of the works I do, I challenge that notion of monumentality. I try to make something that is more tender or humorous or gentle or inclusive, that does not only just war heroes, mostly men with mustache. The big challenge for me was to propose something that had a meaning and that was like a kind of a counter monument. Since I always work in the public space, I always was close to this figure of the pigeon. It's a marginal figure, but also like a companion of our species. It's an iconic character of the city of New York, so I felt a pigeon deserved to have a monument, and that actually would be a very serious proposal for me, or what could be a proper monument for New York. Complex, you know, not a hero and anti-hero at the same time, loved and hate.
And so, as I understand it, it's actually scaled approximately to the height of T-Rex.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about those
definitely.
illusions? And
Birds are what, let's say, remains of dinosaurs, and proposing this monument of like celebrating these other species, somehow there is a sign or symbol that says like, we're not eternal as a species, and we're going to be probably extinct, and we're kind of trying to accelerate that in the past 100 years. There's many layers on the work, but one of the layers is like this idea of extinction. It may be we're going to be the pigeons, let's say, in the future. We're going to be probably the marginals in the future cities of other intelligences or species.
in a way, it's sort of enacting that reversal because it almost feels like we're in the pigeon position, and like the pigeon is actually looking down on us and sort of has this sense of dominance. Can you talk a bit about the process?
The eyes were very important. They were made in LA. We worked with this artisan who make eyes for like Disney attractions. And the like actual dinosaurs in like natural history museums. We had to study the anatomy of an eye of a pigeon, and then we reproduce it in resin. So it looks like it's always looking at you.
It's piercing.
If you paint it, it will look like the eyes will do this and this.
You know, it's funny, earlier we saw a pigeon actually land on the plant. I'm curious, like, what would you imagine the pigeon's response to this is?
I had this secret fantasy of like, somehow like thousands of pigeons starting flying around in circles and becoming this kind of oracle of like, oh. Haven't happened yet.
We're now descending the High Line to explore some of the galleries and art spaces in the neighborhood, including my home institution, Dia Chelsea. Dia is a constellation of 12 sites and locations, including galleries, long-term installations, site-specific projects, and land art. At Dia Chelsea, there is currently an exhibition of works by artist Steve McQueen. So Donna, can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at?
Well, the works here right now are a group of photographs that he took in Grenada, which is where his family is from. And he sort of sees these images as witness to all the things that happened on the island of Grenada. So there's both beauty, but there's also the history of colonialism and slavery. And so the title, Bounty, of course, has this duality. Also here is one of his earliest videos called Exodus. And it was filmed using a Super 8 camera in a very improvisational way of two men walking through the streets of London who happened to be carrying coconut palms. And so they link to many of the ideas of migration, the diaspora. And both this installation and the other gallery, Sunshine State, are both all about notions of journey. And his father actually picked oranges in Florida, and that is very much the subject of Sunshine State. And of course, they are ultimately a companion to what's in Beacon, which is McQueen's installation called Base. I would say the inspiration for it was him thinking about the Middle Passage and the role that sound had as the enslaved were crossing the oceans, and all they really had was sound. And so it is both a light and sound immersive installation. This parallel is one of the few times we've also had projects by the same artist in both sites, in Chelsea and in Beacon.
Steve McQueen was an artist that you felt you had to work with in this context. Why is that?
You know, it's very rare to work with an artist who has this sort of dual career as a filmmaker of feature films and also as a gallery artist. I think he is really a truly great artist. I think McQueen has always been interested in both past and present. He reveals that the past is still very much active in the present. It draws on ideas about history, but it doesn't historicize. Many things just persist. And, you know, I think he's got his finger on the pulse of the moments that we're in.
And Donna, I'm curious, you know, this piece Bounty, do you have a favorite?
There is a diptych over there, and there are very few diptychs. And that you'll see, they just punctuate. And this one is sort of quite beautiful because there's a butterfly. And again, this kind of duality, the irony of something so incredibly beautiful, but also has been witness to very horrific acts throughout history. This also shows something of his cinematic quality, you know, of an action, but through stillness.
Across the street from Dia is one of 4 of Hauser Wirth's New York outposts. Hauser Wirth represents over 90 artists and estates, and the gallery is known for its ambitious exhibitions and support of visionary artistic projects worldwide. So Alexis, we're here in Hauser Wirth in this amazing exhibition by Camille Henrot called A Number of Things. Can you tell us about some of the things going on here?
This is an installation of recent and brand new work by Camille that really deals with the idea of how we are socialized and learn to live in community, in society. So thinking about everything from early childhood development to the ways in which we count or quantify our daily existence. And she's thought about it from a number of different angles that address this idea of belonging and not belonging.
There's this amazing green sort of carpet sort of connecting the entire space. Can you talk a little bit about what environment we're walking into?
Well, the mise en scène for Camille has always been really important. She thinks about almost world building, right? How you come into a total environment. And here she uses a material that is familiar from gym flooring or playgrounds. It's kind of almost soft and cushiony, so it really changes the way that the space feels and sounds. And on top of that is this grid, which is evocative of maybe virtual space, maybe psychological space, but also the idea of the Euclidean space of quantifying our measuring our existence. The grid itself contracts and expands depending on which way you're looking at it, turning it up a little bit up on its head.
And there's a lot of different sort of actors in this space, both inanimate objects and ones that one might interact with, such as like these children's games sort of scaled up. But also, I think one of my favorite parts of this exhibition is this group of dog sculptures that are tethered to a pole. Can you talk a little bit about what she's playing with these different animal forms?
So the dogs are like classic New York City scene, right? You'd see groups of dogs anywhere you go in this city, leashed together, waiting for their dog walker. Dogs for Camille represent this very important idea of domestication and attachment. but also the ways in which that's a kind of fragile or uncertain condition, right? So dogs are domesticated animals, they become support animals, and we have this tender relationship for them, but they are at the same time fundamentally different species, right, with their own kind of wild inclinations. So they have this kind of tension between socialized behavior and unpredictability. They're also funny. And Camille, one of the wonderful things about her work is she uses humor really pointedly to help us think about the sometimes difficult issues that we deal with in our daily lives in a new and kind of generative way.
A couple blocks down at Tina Kim is an exhibition curated by Adam Charlotte Hyman titled Vintage 20, Design for Living. So I'd just love to hear a bit more about the history of the gallery, its mission, and how it got established.
Tina Kim Gallery was founded back in 2001, and this is actually the 10th anniversary of our space on 21st Street. We're known for our international program of contemporary artists, as well as historical overviews and independent curatorial projects. The gallery is widely recognized for the work that we've done in building institutional and public recognition for Korean Tansekwa artists.
And so you've mentioned independent curated projects. I think we might be standing in one right now. I believe you all have collaborated with Adam before, and I'm just curious to hear a bit more about that relationship.
Adam Charlotte Hyman is a close friend of the gallery. He's worked on a couple of our exhibitions, as well as Tina's home in Manhattan and Long Island. So this was a really natural collaboration for us. This show is an homage to the Manhattan-based design firm Vintage 20 that was known for staging important museum-quality exhibitions on mid-century furniture and design. Vintage 20 was really recognized for sort of merging art and design and showing both in tandem and fostering that dialogue between the two disciplines.
So you mentioned how Tina Kim Gallery has really been influential in terms of bringing higher recognition to the Tansekwa movement. Could you tell me a little bit more about Tansekwa?
Tansekwa is loosely interpreted as Korean monochrome painting, and it's sort of a full circle moment for the gallery this year. Time to Frieze, New York. We will actually be opening a really major show of Tansekwa artists here at the gallery. So we're really excited to kind of build on the momentum of Frieze Week and the international art audience coming into town and continue the work that we've done, fostering recognition of that.
The perfect end to my day is a drink at the Hotel Chelsea. Built as a housing cooperative in the 1880s, Hotel Chelsea is a truly iconic institution, once home to many legendary writers, musicians, artists, and entertainers, and immortalized in literature, art, and song. It feels like we're in good company after a day spent immersed in art.